Paul Mensa's Wall of Power TV is brought to you in part by Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation, Two Gingers Irish Whiskey, Grey Wolf Lodge, your home away from home in the North Woods, and the Solar Arts Building in Northeast Minneapolis. This program was produced and originally broadcast in 2017.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wall of Power. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. I have a great guest tonight that I think you music fans, and especially Rolling Stones fans, are really going to enjoy. Rob Chapman has written a great book called The New Barbarians, Outlaws, Gunslingers, and Guitars. It's about a supergroup that included Ron Wood, fellow Rolling Stones guitarist Keith Richards, jazz bassist Stanley Clarke, former Faces keyboardist Ian McLagan, saxman Bobby Keys, and drummer Joseph Zigaboo Modaliste from the legendary New Orleans group The Meters. The book chronicles gigs the band did between 1979 and 1980 and features some incredible photos as well as a companion CD. Rob Chapman spent 25 years on the label side of the music business, working with such notable artists as Warren Zevon and Robert Plant. A former radio show host, he's particularly fond of blues and reggae. Rob lives with his wife Alyssa and daughters Izzy and Jade in Minneapolis. With no further ado, my guest and friend, Rob Chapman. Rob, thanks for being here.
Paul, thanks for having me.
I just got done reading the book just a couple of nights ago. It's a great read. It's a great story. The photographs are fabulous. And the companion CD is really good, too. How did the whole project start?
You know, the project started in a very weird way. I was actually working for a publishing company at the time here in Minneapolis. And not to be a name dropper, but I've known Ronnie for years.
Okay.
And I was listening to a Barbarians bootleg. There's some good ones and some bad ones out there. And I was actually listening to one, and I was emailing him about that very thing. I was like, I'm listening to this show from Cincinnati, and I said, you know, it's not bad. He goes, really? It's pretty good? And I said, yeah, you have to punch up some of the stuff.
Right.
And he said, oh, great. He goes, can you send me a copy? I don't know if I have that. And I said, yeah. And our conversation continued. I said, you know, why didn't anybody ever write a book about this or document? To me, it was always so cool. It was always so important in the Stones, you know, continuing into the 80s. I said, like a program or a photo, something, and I'm, you know, typing all this. And he's like, maybe you should do it. And he went to bed. He's in London. The day, you know, passed. And about, you know, it was a day or 2 days later, his manager, her name's Sherry Daly, who's been with him since 79 or 80, said, you know, Ronnie says you might have some ideas on a Barbarians book. I know nothing about him. I forget that part of, but,
right.
You know, maybe you could put something together. So I was kind of like, well, I guess I'm doing it, you know, and I was off and running.
Had you ever written a book or articles before?
No, never had done a book, and not that I wouldn't have entertained the idea, I just never thought about anything that I was that excited about, you know,
right.
So this made sense.
But you're a big, not only a big music fan, but you worked in the business for a long time, too. Tell us a little bit about your background in the music business.
I grew up here, like I said. I started off working for a company called, and I did retail. I didn't finish college, did retail at
Nobody in rock and roll has.
Right, right. And I don't trust them if they did.
Exactly. I'm totally on board with that.
So my first real sales job was with a local company called Navarre.
Sure.
And at the time, they were software and physical CDs, you know, cassettes. And I got a sales job there. Promotion came when they offered me a job in Sacramento to go babysit Tower Records. I mean, that was the gig. Gladly did that. I was single, I was young at the time, went out to Sacramento, and everything just kind of went from there. I obviously did okay where I caught the eye of, at the time it was Uni Records, became Universal, got a job with Universal doing the same thing, moved up through different companies. I worked for MCA for a while, Artemis Records, Sanctuary Records, and, you know, was able to, you know, just advance. I think, you know, hard work and just my passion for music like a lot of people, and I did it for 20 some years.
Plus those great Midwestern work values,
I
right?
think that was part of it, yeah. And I was, like all these guys like Johnny Carson, some of these guys, that's the thing that I think endeared them to a lot of people, is they were just, underneath the veneer, they were just normal guys. I always thought I was just a normal guy, and I
Right.
could relate to a lot of people. So
Right, but
it got me
good-
a long way.
Good work ethic,
Good work ethic.
ability to get along with people. Didn't you work a little bit with Chess Records too? One of the greatest labels of all time.
Absolutely. That is kind of how this all was able to happen. I was working for MCA in the 90s, and they were going to relaunch, kind of dust off Chess Records.
Right.
And the goal was in 1997 to do a 50th anniversary of celebrating the label, 2120 Michigan Avenue.
And for those of you out there in the viewing and listening audience that don't know, Chess Records was probably the greatest blues label of all time. Ike Turner, Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, Willie Dixon. I mean,
you can go on Howlin' Wolf,
Yeah, Howlin'
Lowell
Wolf.
Fulson.
Yeah.
It
never ends.
It never ends. It's amazing once you Etta James. You can just keep going. And in Chicago, where everybody, there's different pockets of blues, but Chicago blues always were what I liked.
Right, and you would, and there would not be the Rolling Stones without Chess Records.
Absolutely, and the Stones, as you know, and a lot of those English bands couldn't wait to get to America because Motown, Harlem,
Right.
Chess Records, the South with Stax. They couldn't believe that stuff wasn't championed more over here. They thought, I
Right.
wish I could live there.
Right.
Because you guys got all this stuff here. So when they came over, the Stones, that was one of the places they went, first couple records, they went and cut some tracks at Chess and couldn't believe, that they were in this sacred ground, so to speak.
Well, there's that great story that Keith Richards tells. Marshall Chess, the son of, was it Phil Chess?
Yep.
Yeah. One of the founders with his brother. Keith says when he went in, the first time he went in the studio, he saw this really handsome black guy painting the ceiling with white paint. He had white all over this beautiful face of his. And according to Keith's memory, and it is Keith's memory, he said it was Muddy Waters. Now, Marshall discounts that, said we would never have had Muddy painting the walls at Chess. But have you heard that story?
I've never heard it. I've heard it twice in two different documentaries where he's like, Keith pauses and says, first time I met Muddy Waters, he was painting the dang ceilings at Chess Records. And so he's either, don't let the truth spoil a good story, or
Right.
he's is true, and Marshall's just defending that. What do you think we were? But, Keith tells it a couple different times. So MCA decides we're going to do this. We're going to, this is the height of CDs where everybody's,
Right.
okay, I'm done with vinyl. I guess I better buy all my stuff on CD.
Right.
So they're like, we want to do this big splash in the Midwest, buy all the retailers, get whoever's left alive. Who wants, I'll do it, I
Right,
couldn't even
right.
raise my hand quick enough.
Right.
Chapman will do it. So my whole next 6 months was to, champion Chess Records again. So I gladly took on the chore, and that is, where my long and still there friendship with Keith and then into Ronnie started, was that foray into Chess Records. And there's a longer story, but that's what started all this off.
Is there any yet unreleased stuff? Who's ever the keys to the Chess Vault? Because I imagine they recorded a lot of stuff. Not all that saw the light of day.
Well, there's a lot of, as you know, they call them B-sides, and
Right.
the early workings of songs. There's a lot of demos, which they've never, that to my recollection. How the blues is. It's a feel. It's a, whereas somebody's going to go cut a pop record, they can release B-sides, and they're not quite the version that's on the radio.
Right.
But they're cool.
Right.
I know there's lots of tape at Chess Vaults that they don't know what to do with them, and who's going to oversee that and do it the right way.
Rob Chapman.
I'll do it. I'm raising my hand second time. You can help me.
Oh, I would love to. My God. Sitting down in those vaults after midnight listening to that stuff on a reel, can you imagine?
No, and that was surreal when we went there for the party. It was, they actually hired a guy to, what he does is he takes microphones. Well, we want 47 microphones, make them. So there was stuff, you walk in the studio and it's circa 1947.
Wow.
the boxes are hollow. They're not real,
Right,
but they
right.
looked real.
Right.
I don't know what you call that. There, he had a name on his card, and that's what he flies around, and people could want Van Halen studio, like when they cut their first record, and he makes it. So you walked in, and it was like, you know, it was real, like, wow, this is like, took you back.
So when you started working on this relaunch of Chess, who were some of those blues icons that were still alive that you got to press the flesh?
Well, Marshall and Phil both came. Phil Chess and Marshall Chess. We got Johnny Brim came, who wrote Ice Cream. Nobody knows Ice Cream Man before David Lee Roth took it big. Van Halen. What was really funny is, and I have a picture of it at home, Willie Dixon's widow was there. And everybody's like, Willie Dixon? Well, he obviously married her when she was real young. So Willie
like
Dixon,
Muddy Waters.
Right, exactly. So Willie Dixon's widow came, and you know, there wasn't many other ones that, there might have been a few that were still around, but they, for whatever reason, didn't get them. So, you know, the Chess Brothers were there, a couple of the other ones, and a lot of, you know, like I said, they invited people from all walks of life, radio stations, retailers, and it was a fun night.
We're going to listen to a little music and then more with Rob Chapman on the Wall of Power. Welcome back to the Wall of Power. This is your host, Paul Metsa. We have a great guest for the whole show tonight, a fellow named Rob Chapman. He wrote a book about the new Barbarians, which was a band that Ronnie Wood had with Keith Richards and some other great musicians. We'll talk about some more. But at the end of the last set, Rob, you were kind of talking about how your connection with Keith and Ronnie Wood started. I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah, we were talking about the chess party. So the chess party happens. It's turned out it's a great night, and
what year was this exactly?
This would have been '97.
Okay.
Because the Stones were down in L.A. finishing at Ocean Way, I believe, finishing up what became Babylon, Bridges to Babylon,
Right.
and then the tour would have been in the fall. So summer of '97.
And what was that first record in '47 that Chess put out?
God, you know what? I don't know what the first one they put out. It's a
Right.
good question. I don't remember.
Was it Long Distance Call by Muddy Waters, maybe something?
You know, I don't know.
Good question.
Yeah. So party ends, and there's this guy who ended up doing some of the sound. His name is Fletcher, and he's from Boston. And he comes out. He's a big, you know, chain smoker. And so I'm just out hanging outside to get some fresh air. And he goes, "Can you get me some of these?" Because we had on display all these CDs. He goes, "Can you get me some of these?" I said, "Yeah, sure." I live in Minneapolis. I said, here's my card. I go, call me, and I'll send you a little care package. No problem. So that comes and goes. I'd say 2 weeks go by. I'm back in Minneapolis, my office, and the phone rings, and you know, I put it on speaker. "Hey, it's Fletcher. Remember me?" And I go, "Yeah." I said, "You want some of the promos?" He said, "Yeah." He goes, "But I need quite a few." And I said, "Okay." And I hear that all the time.
Right.
"How many are we talking?" And he goes, "Well, I need a set. I need 4 sets." I go, "Well, you mean
I've
one?"
got friends that have friends, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going, so I'm thinking in my head, I'm thinking we just released, you want 160 CDs, because it was 40 reissues. And I'm like, "Fletcher, you're killing." I said,
Right.
you know, I'm like, I'm thinking, what's this greedy?
Right.
And he goes, "Well, hold on. He goes, "I'm going to send them to the Stones." And I said, you know, then I took it off speaker to, you know, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." He goes, and I checked it all out. He had done a little bit of work with Keith, like Talk Is Cheap or one of the solo records. So he fleshed it out. So I said, "Sure." So then I'm all excited.
Right.
So then I get his wish list together, get it all together, 4 sets. I threw in some Chess T-shirts that we made, and I send it to, you know, Ocean Way Studios. And he says, "Well, you can't send it. They don't check in under their name." So there's a name. He goes, "You're going to send it to Biff Hitler." And I didn't know who that was at the time, but it ended up being Keith. And
Biff Hitler, okay.
Biff Hitler. And you know, time goes on, and I did my thing. And so in my head, I'm like, "Boy, that was cool. I got some of the Stones, some CDs."
Right.
So Fletcher ends up talking to a guy named Rob Fraboni, he mixes some of Bridges to Babylon. Fraboni gets my number. He introduces himself. He said,
And Fraboni goes way back to the band.
Yep, absolutely.
That's
the band and some
Dylan.
Carl Wilson stuff
Yeah.
with the Beach Boys and some Dylan, and then ended up doing a little stuff. He was part owner of Shangri-La Studios,
in
which is
Malibu.
which is where Barbarians cut Mac's record, which is another. We can tell that story if we get to it. But so he calls me and he says, "Thanks for the Stones. Are so happy. They love it. Thank you. But I got to ask you for another set." And I'm like, he goes, "Well, let me tell you the story." He goes, "So I was going to take a set, Charlie,
Right.
Keith, and Ronnie.
Right.
And they're all sitting around the box, go, oh, give me that, give me that,
Right,
give me that."
right.
And Mick walks in.
Right.
And they're like, he goes, "What do you got over there?" And they're like, they look at him and they're like,
Right.
chest stuff, take a set.
Right.
So he goes, "I got edged out for Mick."
Right,
So he
right.
goes, "I just want a set for myself." And it was
You
just hilarious.
can't say no to Mick Jagger.
Well, right. And the fact that they're trying to hide it from, like, what do you
Right.
got over there?
Well,
So,
what's cool about that, karmically, is the tale of how Keith Richards and Mick Jagger got together as school kids. Was Keith saw Mick carrying some blues records, might have been chess records way back in the day.
he always says it was Rockin' the Hops, Muddy Waters' Greatest Hits, and I think Rockin' at the Hops by Chuck Berry, but they
Right.
were definitely chess stuff.
So 50 years
that
later,
funny?
man, the circle's complete.
And that's what after.
And now you're part of the circle.
I know, it's like I can, maybe my kids will never get it, but I get it.
Right.
So I send him another set, time goes by, and I fast forward to the fall, they're gonna play the Metrodome. I get a call, it must have got my number again, and I must have put of course, put my home number, and I get a call from a guy who talks really fast and stutters.
Right.
His name is Tony Russell. Tony's been with Keith since 1987. It's what they call a handler.
He wasn't stuttering when he started working with Keith.
No, he is now. And he's wound up tighter than,
Yeah,
it's like
sure, a drum.
Working with him on tour must have put him to the test.
Of
So he
course.
calls me and he's like, "Hey, Bob, it's Tony Russell." He goes, "Do you think I could, you want to come to the Stone Show? You got tickets?" He goes, "Keith really wants to thank you for all the stuff you sent him." And he's like, "So I said, "I have tickets." He goes, "But I'm sure yours are better." He goes, "Yeah, I'll put a pair." And he goes, "Come say hello." And he goes, "I got to go." So I go pick up the tickets, get back about 3 levels of security.
Right.
And I come to this big room, and I see Charlie Watts wrestling with these kids, and it turns out to be Ronnie's kids.
Wow.
And I go, I'm in the belly of the beast. I'm in the right place.
Right.
And Tony comes and gets me.
But the Rolling Stones is family men now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, at that point, then that's
At least in that room.
And yeah, exactly. And then they also there's 4 hallways where they have their own rooms. 'Cause I saw Bobby Keys, I saw Bernard Fowler. None of the Stones were in that room. So he takes me down, basically says, you got about 30 minutes.
Right.
And he pushes me in the room, and there he is. Keith's sitting on a couch, set list, the infamous ratchet knife,
Right.
and some cigarettes. And I look over, and there's a guy standing there like this. It's his bartender. And he's like, "Oh, you made it, you made it." And he's like, he was just, yes, was I nervous walking down that hallway? And I'd met a lot of musicians at that
Right.
point who were big, but this was a biggie.
Yeah.
And walking down there, I was nervous. He is exactly what you hoped and you hear. He was very warm, very, made me feel really at home. And we talked about blues, Labradors, how he hates Vegas now because it's turned into a family thing.
Right.
It was just me and you talking.
Right.
And I'd have to turn my head every now and then and go almost like that Chris Farley.
Yeah, right.
Keith Richards. But I couldn't let him see me do that. I had to compose myself.
It's too bad Farley didn't have a chance to interview Keith. Did Keith offer you what I heard he likes to drink? Orange Crush?
It was
Crush and
Fanta.
vodka. Yeah, Fanta and vodka.
And he called it toxic waste.
Yeah.
and he did, and it's a funny story that I've told. He made me a really stiff one, that much orange juice filled with vodka. And then he took a cigarette and he blew in it, and it kind of came out the top. And I go, "What was that?" He goes, "Dragon's breath." I go, "Can't get you better than this."
Wow.
So that's 97. That's what, 20 years ago? So every time Tony told me, he goes, "You can come to any show you want." I never asked him for tickets. but he would hook me up with passes. He goes, go to Omaha, go to Kansas City.
Right.
He goes, I can't help you in LA or New York, forget
Right,
it.
right.
And he was true to his word. I would go, I'm going to Omaha. He goes, I'll leave 2 passes at the hotel front desk, blah, blah, blah. But I'd always bring him a gift. So I would bring Keith a Johnny Cash boot, a Lee Scratch Perry boot. I knew what they liked, and that morphed into being a guy who didn't ask him for anything but just hung out. And then Ronnie would get, what do you got? So I struck up this friendship with these guys just over being guys.
Fantastic. This is the first time I've had a guest on the Wall of Power that it's a friend of Keith Richards and Ronnie Woods. We got Rob Chapman on for the whole show tonight. We're going to listen to some new Barbarians and be back in just a little bit. Welcome back to the Wall of Power. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. We've had a great guest on, and we're going to keep him on for the rest of the show. Mr. Rob Chapman has written a great book called New Barbarians, about the New Barbarians. We were just getting done. He was backstage with the man himself, Keith Richards. Yep. When did you get into the Stones for the first time?
I'm 55. I have brothers that are in their late 60s. And I have a sister that's 62. So our big cabinet that you open up, the big stereo console, had everything from the Beach Boys to Frank Sinatra to the Beatles to the Stones.
Right.
So I was luckily baptized on really good music. And as I got older, I'm sure like a lot of people, there was that big, you Beatles corner, you in the Stones corner.
Right.
I tended to be more of a hellion.
Right.
So I
You're a Stones guy.
I migrated to the Stones. It wasn't even a question. So I've been into the Stones since, I was a kid, and the first time I saw them was, I saw them the 81 tour where Lamont Cranston and the Stray Cats opened up for
St.
them.
Paul Civic Center.
Yep.
So, okay, now let's fast forward ahead. So in the ensuing years...
So I'm working in the music business for, as you know, 2000 in the music business was the largest, for physical goods, it was the biggest year for revenue. Boy bands were, driving a lot of people to stores. Everybody was buying CDs. It was huge. 2001, Jobs dropped the iPod on the industry, and it just went, everybody from studios, people that could use Pro Tools to, physical goods. Everybody started losing jobs pretty quickly.
Right.
Retailers went from 1,000 stores to 700 stores to 500 stores to, Transworld's going to buy Musicland, and it just got ugly really quick.
Right.
And so, I was able to hang on in the music business for, quite a while like everybody else. I was in the right town with Best Buy, Musicland, Target all being based here.
Right.
But then, came a time where, I needed to do something, and I always thought the one thing that I hadn't done, I'd promoted movies on the side as a hobby. I had made money in the music business, but I'd never done anything in publishing or with the word or the book. And there's where the book has been published, Quarto Publishing is in here, has an office in Minneapolis. There was a sales opening, and I had a buddy that I knew who was there, and he said, difference working in a publishing house and a label is the label's got the artist delivers a record, you sell and market the record.
Right.
Publishing house, the artist is the author. Author delivers a book, you put the book out, you market it and sell it. It's just two different pieces of art.
Right.
So he goes, you can do this. And so I went to work for Quarto Publishing, which is...
Spell that for the people, because I know they've got a lot of great titles. A lot of music stuff. Spell Quarto.
Quarto is spelled Q-U-A-R-T-O.
Quarto,
like Quarto milk. And their offices are all over. And, for people that are from here, Mark Rosen's books came out through them. A friend of both of ours, John Breams, put his books out through Quarto. So they have a nice little music, kind of entertainment imprint here. So I ended up going to work for them in like 2014. And so I'm inside now of a publishing company, and that's where the whole formation of the book started.
Okay. So what year was that? Did you start working?
2014.
Okay.
Yep.
So, when was the actual genesis? You go, New Barbarians. There's a book here. You know, when did that happen, or who had that idea? Was it you?
I mean, it's, you know, there's diehard Stones fans that are on the sites that love the New Barbarians. You know, they just love them, and I was one of those guys that would buy Cream magazine, Circus magazine,
right.
And you see these great spread, you know, because the Stones had Some Girls in '78, toured for it. They should have done a European tour in '79, but there were so many things going on. Their band was, you know, messed up in a good way, but in a, you know, disorganized way.
Well, someday